today I would like to discuss a learning model that I find extremely useful when trying to evaluate where students are in their progression towards language proficiency. This is the model known as the 4 stages of competence, or simply the 4 stages to learn any skill. This model was actually developed in management, so it's supposed to apply to the learning of any skill out there, not just languages, but it has lately proved extremely helpful in trying to explain how language learning actually may progress through different stages, from the total beginner to the proficient mastery of the language. However, I think with all the misinformation that there is on the internet at the moment about language learning, this is a model that, while it remains a model, it remains a theoretical model, it proves extremely helpful to understand the different stages that we all usually go through when we are acquiring a new skill, including in the development of a new language. Now, speaking a new language is actually one of the most complex skills that the human being is able to perform. It literally restructures your brain and it's going to create new pathways that didn't exist before. So not all skills are equally complex, and it won't take the same amount of time to go through the different stages for all skills. But in this case, I want to compare learning a language with driving a car, just so that you can better relate to what the different stages may feel like. So this model claims that there are 4 distinct stages when we are trying to learn any skill, including a language. The first of these stages would be what we know as unconscious incompetence. And this is the very beginning, when you don't even know what you are embarking on, right? So you've decided you want to learn French, but you just know some French songs, maybe you have heard about some French authors, but you don't know how complex the language is, you don't know if it had cases or not cases, if it has regular verbs or irregular verbs. You are literally still in that ignorance period where you just know you have that goal, but you have to start getting your hands dirty and start learning the language. The equivalent for driving would be when you decide you're going to pass your driving license, but the most you know about cars is from being a passenger, so you've never really sat at the wheel or know anything about road signs. So you do know what it is about, but you don't necessarily know where to start. So at this stage of the language learning process, you start learning about the language. You learn that it has a lot of irregular verbs. You learn that the phonetic system, it's kind of easy to read because there are some rules, but there are lots of exceptions. There are lots of things that sound similar and they're written differently and the other way around. So you start realizing the complexity of the task. And in this process is when you actually move to the second stage, which would be the stage of the conscious incompetence. So you are still incompetent, you still don't know enough about the skill or about how to implement this skill, but at least now you are aware of how things work and what you need to learn if you want to progress. So this is when you start actually with the mechanics of the language. You start learning all the verbs and the grammar and doing exercises and feeling completely lost. You realize how overwhelming it is, but you're not at the level yet where you can master it. And then if you're driving, now you've realized there are 1,000 different road signs to remember, and then you have the pedals, and then you have the wheel, and then you have all the gears to change. So you start to understand the complexity of it, but you're still totally unable to coordinate everything that needs to happen at the same time to say that you're actually able to drive. But then you keep practicing, and remember, practice makes perfect. So as you keep putting hours and hours of practice, these rules start becoming a bit easier to remember, and vocabulary is easier to retrieve, and you find the right word faster than before, and you start making more complex sentences. And going back to the example of the car, now you're able to actually drive the car, but you are still not quite confident of what you are doing. And this is when we move to the stage of conscious competence. You are already able to perform the task, but it's still taking enormous resources for you to be able to perform it well. It's not something you can do while you're listening to music or while you're talking to a friend, like most experienced drivers are actually able to do. So at this stage in the language learning journey, you are still very conscious of your mistakes, you're very worried that you're going to say something wrong, you're still having to think about the rules, you're trying to remember the right words. It definitely doesn't come naturally, it doesn't flow. You're still having difficulties. You're already able to use the language when you need it, but it's still at a stage that requires a lot of conscious concentration in order to use it appropriately. But you keep practicing, and practice makes perfect. So the more you use it, the more this is going to become automatized. In the same way that once you've got the grips of driving, you just need hours of practice in order to automatize all the movements and to know when you have to lift one foot, when you have to push another pedal, when you have to change the gear, when you have to turn your wheel, how much you have to turn it. All of that just comes with practice and eventually is automatized so that it comes so naturally that you realize suddenly you are able to do it without thinking consciously about it. And you might even be able to have a conversation with someone at the same time that you are driving, which seemed totally impossible when you were in the previous stage. Now, this is when you move to the last stage of learning. This is the stage of unconscious competence. So remember, in the previous one, you were still conscious of what you were doing. Now, this is just happening unconsciously. And for the language, this usually translates in a certain fluidity in the way you speak or in the way you write. You don't need to think about the sentences in advance. You don't need to think about the vocabulary. You don't think to repeat the grammar rules in your head before putting together a sentence, because you have acquired the language. You have managed to automatize all those rules or that vocabulary, all the things that you've been practicing and learning in the previous stages have now become so ingrained in your brain that your brain is able to use them naturally without a big conscious effort, like it was the case in the previous stage. And here you are already at the level of mastery. If you've managed to get to this level, it means you're probably fairly fluent in the language and you are able to communicate quite proficiently. Now, what you have to remember when it comes to language learning is that you may need to go through these 4 stages for each rule that you are introducing and even for each word of vocabulary. And that comes through practice, practice, and more practice. So remember all those hours that you may have spent doing grammar exercises or vocabulary or reading or writing or speaking. It's necessary in order to move up to the last stage, which is the goal of most language students. If you want to get there, then unfortunately what research shows is that we first need to go through the other stages so that we can get to that last stage. This is just a theoretical framework, but I find this extremely helpful to guide my students to understand where they are with each of their skills as with individual language elements, because it really helps them see the kind of support they need to automatize the process and actually interiorize those specific structures. So if you found this video interesting, but you're wondering how you can apply these 4 stages to your own learning and feeling a bit lost, I've got good news, because I've recently developed a little resource, just a little tracker using these 4 stages to help my clients make more progress in whatever language they're learning. So if you go into the description, you're going to see a link where you can just sign up to get this resource. This is a resource I find it extremely helpful. It's been really life-changing for my students, at least in what regards to language learning. And what we do is we use it in our regular checkups. So depending on how fast the student wants to learn, we usually have checkups either every month or every fortnight, every 2 weeks. And what we do is that we are going to look at the different, I'm going to show you very quickly so you see what I'm talking about. So basically I only have 3 stages. Why only have 3 and not 4? Okay, because the first one, we're not going to really care about it right now. The first one, remember, is all the things that we don't know that we don't know. So we're not going to put the entire dictionary in there, right? So it makes no sense. So we're going to focus on stage 2, 3, and 4. And what we want to see is what elements are in each of these stages that we want to focus on moving on to the next stage because we think they are strategically very useful, or because maybe we need them, we have a presentation coming up and those are words that we know we're going to want to use and we want to have very fresh in our minds.
I will be publishing in a couple of days another video where I'm going to be explaining how to use this template specifically to learn vocabulary and to make sure that you remember vocabulary forever and ever. So depending on when you're watching this, maybe the video has already been published. In that case, I will be putting the link somewhere around here and in the description. If not, make sure that you subscribe so that whenever I publish it in a couple of days, the system will actually let you know. And if you are struggling to learn a language and you've tried a bit everything and you're following everyone but don't really know who to listen to or what to do anymore because nothing seems to be working, make sure you subscribe to this channel because I'm trying to post a long video every single day during this month. So my goal is that by just watching these videos, at the end of the month, you will be in a much better position and will have much more clarity about the specific steps that you need to take if you want to become fluent in a language. And it's all based on how the brain works with language and with communication, because that's what I'm an expert in. So that's really the thing I'm going to be talking about. So let me know what you thought about the video in the comments. Make sure to download the tracker and I'll see you in the next video.